The marking ceremony was supposed to be her triumph. For 18 years, Sorsha had waited for this moment. Varek, Alpha King of Valdoria, was her fated mate. The bond had been foretold since her birth, confirmed by every seer in the kingdom. So when she stood before him at the sacred altar, surrounded by thousands of witnesses, dressed in ceremonial white with her heart pounding against her ribs, she expected him to mark her. Instead, he looked right through her. "I choose another," he said. And before Sorsha's mind could process those three devastating words, Varek turned to her cousin Cosima and sank his teeth into her neck. The crowd erupted in gasps. Sorsha stood frozen, watching the man destined to be hers claim another woman. The rejection slammed into her chest like a blade forged from ice. Pain so violent she couldn't breathe. She was supposed to be queen. Now she was nothing. Less than nothing. A rejected mate, an object of pity and whispered mockery for the rest of her existence. Then a voice cut through the chaos. "If you've discarded her," it said, cold and utterly calm, "then I'll take her." Every head turned toward the great doors. Standing in the entrance was the one man who should never have been there. Maelor, Alpha King of Thornhaven, Valdoria's greatest enemy. His eyes, dark as a moonless night, found Sorsha's across the crowded hall. "What do you say?" he asked her directly, ignoring the horrified nobility, the snarling guards, even Varek himself. "Come with me, or stay here and rot in your humiliation." Sorsha looked at Varek, at Cosima, blood still wet on her throat, at the thousand faces that would whisper about her rejection for generations. Then she looked at the enemy king who had just offered her an escape. "I'll go with you," she whispered. Maelor smiled. A cold, dangerous thing that promised nothing good. "Then you're mine now." Neither of them understood what that vow would truly cost. The great hall of Valdoria had never been more beautiful. Thousands of candles hung suspended from the vaulted ceiling, their flames casting everything in liquid gold. Garlands of moonflowers and silver thistle draped every pillar. The air was thick with incense and anticipation. This was the night the kingdom had waited for 18 years. The night their Alpha King would finally claim his fated mate. Sorsha stood at the base of the altar steps, her hands trembling beneath the flowing sleeves of her ceremonial gown, white silk embroidered with silver thread, the dress of a future queen. Her auburn hair had been braided with pearls, her amber eyes lined with kohl, her skin anointed with sacred oils. Everything was perfect. Everything except the cold dread pooling in her stomach. She glanced up at Varek, seated on his throne above her. He was magnificent, golden-haired, broad-shouldered, with the angular features of ancient warrior kings. Every unmated woman in the realm had wept when the seers announced that Sorsha, a minor noble's daughter, was his destined bride. But in the 3 years since that announcement, Varek had barely spoken to her. When their paths crossed, his blue eyes slid over her like she was furniture, like she was nothing. "He'll love you once the bond is sealed," her Aunt Morvain had assured her. "Fated bonds are unbreakable. He'll have no choice." Sorsha had clung to those words. Tonight, everything would change. Tonight, he would mark her, and the bond would snap into place, and he would finally see her. The high priestess raised her hands, and the hall fell silent. "We gather to witness the sacred marking," she intoned. "Let Alpha King Varek of Valdoria claim his fated mate as the moon has decreed." Varek rose from his throne. Sorsha's heart hammered so violently she could hear nothing else. This was it. 18 years of waiting. A lifetime of loneliness about to end. She would finally belong somewhere. To someone. Varek descended the steps slowly, his blue eyes fixed on her. No, not on her. Past her. Sorsha's blood turned to ice as he walked right by her without a glance. The crowd murmured in confusion. She turned, her body moving on instinct, and watched as Varek stopped in front of her cousin Cosima. Cosima, who was supposed to be standing as her attendant. Cosima, whose green eyes widened in theatrical surprise. Varek, Sorcha heard herself whisper. What are you doing? He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge she'd spoken. I reject the bond decreed by the seers, Varek announced, his voice ringing through the hall. I choose another. I choose Cosima of House Varen as my queen and mate. The world stopped. Sorcha couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her wolf howled inside her chest, clawing at her ribs, shrieking in agony. The rejection wasn't metaphorical, it was physical. A serrated blade dragging through her soul, severing something she'd believed was unbreakable. She watched, unable to look away, as Varek tilted Cosima's head and sank his teeth into the curve of her neck. Cosima moaned. Her eyes fluttered closed in ecstasy, and Sorcha shattered. The crowd erupted. Some screamed in outrage, others cheered. The noble houses that had resented her elevation whispered triumphantly to one another. She was never worthy, they said. The seers were wrong. Sorcha's knees buckled. She would have collapsed right there on the altar steps if a hand hadn't caught her elbow. Steady, a voice murmured. Low, male, unfamiliar. She looked up into eyes black as obsidian. The man was tall, taller than Varek, with shoulders that blocked out the candlelight behind him. His hair was dark as a raven's wing, falling past his jaw in careless waves. His face was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. Sharp, dangerous, utterly without softness. But it was his scent that made her wolf go still. Winter. Frost. Something ancient and cold that shouldn't exist in a living body. Who are you? She breathed. Someone who just watched you get publicly gutted, he said. His eyes swept over the chaos, over Varek and Cosima, still locked in their marking embrace, over the crowd that had already forgotten Sorcha existed, and someone who finds himself in need of a queen. Before she could respond, he released her arm and strode toward the altar. Varek, his voice cracked through the hall like thunder. The Alpha King finally pulled his mouth from Cosima's neck. Blood stained his lips, his eyes blazed with fury as he recognized the intruder. Maelor, he snarled, you dare set foot in my kingdom? Tonight of all nights? Your border guards were disappointingly easy to evade. Maelor stopped at the base of the steps, hands clasped behind his back, posture radiating absolute calm. I came to witness your marking ceremony. Imagine my surprise when I saw you discard your fated mate like spoiled meat. She is none of your concern. On the contrary. Maelor turned to look at Sorcha. A rejected mate is fair claim. Ancient law. Even your high priestess cannot dispute it. The high priestess went pale. He speaks the truth, your majesty. A rejected mate may be claimed by any alpha who offers. Varek's face contorted with rage. You cannot have her. She's nothing. Then you won't mind if I take her. Maelor extended his hand toward Sorcha. What do you say? Spend the rest of your life as Valdoria's laughingstock? Or come with me and be a queen? Every eye turned to her. Sorcha looked at Varek, hoping he would stop this. Say it was a mistake. Take it back. But Varek had already turned away, his attention returning to Cosima. The pain in Sorcha's chest hardened into something else. Something colder. She took Maelor's hand. His skin was ice against hers. I'll go with you, she said. Maelor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then you're mine now. He pulled her toward the doors, his grip unbreakable. Guards lunged forward, but a single look from him stopped them cold. His alpha presence crashed over the hall like a winter storm, freezing everyone in place. No one moved as he led her out. The last thing Sorcha saw before the doors closed was Cosima's triumphant smirk, and her Aunt Morvain, watching from the shadows with an expression Sorcha couldn't read. The carriage was waiting outside the great hall, black as the night sky, pulled by 4 horses whose coats shimmered like smoke. Maelor handed Sorcha inside without ceremony and followed, closing the door behind them. The moment they were alone, his demeanor changed. The cold amusement vanished. His eyes grew distant, calculating. He sat across from her rather than beside her, and the space between them felt deliberate, like he was establishing a boundary. You have questions, he said. It wasn't a question. Sorsha's mind was still reeling. The rejection throbbed in her chest like a wound that wouldn't close. Every heartbeat hurt. But beneath the pain, something sharper was rising. Anger, confusion, the desperate need to understand what had just happened to her life. Why? She managed. Why would you want me? You're Valdoria's enemy. You and Varric have been at war for decades. War's end. Maelor's gaze drifted to the window, watching the torchlit streets of the capital blur past. And queens are useful. You could have any queen, any princess from any kingdom. Why take a rejected mate? A woman everyone just watched get publicly humiliated? A shadow of emotion crossed his face. There and gone before she could name it. Perhaps I enjoy collecting things others have discarded. The words should have stung, but his tone was flat, matter of fact, without cruelty. Like he was stating a simple truth, rather than trying to wound her. Sorsha studied him in the dim carriage light. His face betrayed nothing. His scent remained that strange winter cold, utterly unreadable. Most alphas radiated heat, their emotions bleeding through their scent whether they wanted it or not. But Maelor smelled like frost and silence. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "The truth." He was silent for a long moment. "I need a queen," he said finally. "Thornhaven has been without one for 11 years. My council grows restless. Foreign powers grow bold. A king without a mate is seen as weak." His eyes found hers. "You will solve that problem. And in return, you'll have everything Varric denied you. A crown, a throne, the respect of an entire kingdom." He paused. "What you will not have is love. I have no interest in pretending affection. This arrangement will be political, practical. We will appear united in public. In private, we will live separate lives." Sorsha's wolf stirred weakly in her chest, still wounded from the rejection. She should feel something about his cold proposal. Disappointment. Hurt. But after what Varric had done, Maelor's honesty felt almost refreshing. At least he wasn't pretending. "No love," she repeated slowly. "No affection. Just an arrangement. Does that trouble you?" Sorsha laughed. The sound came out broken. "An hour ago, I expected my fated mate to mark me. Instead, he chose my cousin. I don't think I'll be seeking love anytime soon, Your Majesty." Something shifted in Maelor's expression. Not quite softness, but perhaps the shadow of understanding. "There's one more condition," he said. "You will never return to Valdoria. Whatever life you had there is over. Your family, your friends, your old identity. All of it ends tonight. From this moment forward, you belong to Thornhaven." He leaned forward slightly. "Can you accept that?" Sorsha thought of her father, who had barely acknowledged her existence since her mother's death. Of her Aunt Morvain, whose smiles never reached her eyes. Of Cosima, who had just taken everything from her. What exactly would she be leaving behind? "Yes," she said. "I can accept that." Maelor nodded once. The carriage continued through the night, carrying her away from the only home she'd ever known, toward a kingdom of enemies, toward a king who wanted nothing from her but her title. But as Sorsha settled back against the velvet seat, she noticed Maelor's hands gripping his knees. His knuckles were white, and for just a moment she could have sworn she saw darkness flickering beneath his skin. She woke to unfamiliar sunlight. The room was vast, easily 3 times the size of her chambers in Valdoria. Silver curtains framed tall windows overlooking snow-dusted mountains. The furniture was dark wood and soft furs, elegant without being ostentatious. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the space with comfort she hadn't expected. Sorsha sat up slowly, her body aching from the journey. They'd traveled through the night and most of the next day. She had slept fitfully in the carriage, waking often to find Maelor sitting motionless in the same position, staring out the window like he hadn't moved at all. He didn't sleep, she realized now, the entire journey. Not once. A knock at the door made her jump. Enter, she called, pulling the covers up self-consciously. A woman stepped inside, silver-haired despite her youthful face, with eyes the pale blue of winter sky. She wore servant's clothing, but carried herself like nobility. I am Nolwenn, she said, her voice low and melodic. The king has assigned me as your personal attendant. Attendant or guard? Sorsha asked before she could stop herself. Nolwenn's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. Both, perhaps. The king wishes to ensure your safety. Thornhaven can be unwelcoming to outsiders. She laid out a gown on the bed, deep emerald silk trimmed with black fur. The colors of Thornhaven's royal house. The contract signing is in 1 hour, Nolwenn continued. The king requests your presence in the council chamber. Sorsha dressed quickly, refusing assistance with the laces despite Nolwenn's offers. She dressed herself all her life. She wasn't about to become helpless now, but when she turned to face the mirror, she froze. The woman staring back at her looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed from grief and exhaustion. The rejection still pulsed in her chest, a dull ache that wouldn't fade. The ceremonial braids from last night had come undone, leaving her auburn hair tangled around her face. She looked broken. May I? Nolwenn asked quietly. Sorsha hesitated, then nodded. The servant's hands were gentle as she repaired Sorsha's hair, weaving it into a simple but elegant style that suited the emerald gown. She worked in silence for several minutes before speaking again. You should know something, Nolwenn said softly. About the king. Sorsha met her eyes in the mirror. What about him? He is not what he appears. Nolwenn's fingers paused. The king has not taken a queen in 11 years for reasons the court whispers about, but never speaks aloud. You are the first woman he has brought to Thornhaven since... She stopped, swallowed. Since the darkness began. The darkness? Nolwenn's pale eyes flickered toward the door, as if checking that no one was listening. He carries something inside him. Something that wasn't there before. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Some nights, the servants hear sounds from his chambers. Inhuman sounds. And every year he grows colder. Literally colder. The healers cannot explain it. Sorsha's blood chilled. She remembered the ice of his touch, the frost in his scent. Why are you telling me this? Because everyone else is too afraid to. Nolwenn finished the final braid and stepped back. You have walked into something you don't understand, my lady. The king did not choose you on impulse. Whatever his reasons, they are not what he claims. Her eyes held Sorsha's. Be careful. Before Sorsha could respond, another knock came. The king awaits, a guard announced. The council chamber was carved from black stone, the walls lined with ancient tapestries depicting battles and coronations. A long table dominated the center, occupied by men and women whose expressions ranged from curious to openly hostile. Maelor stood at the head of the table dressed in black formal attire that made him look even more severe than he had last night. His dark eyes tracked her entrance, lingering on the emerald gown. Lady Sorsha, he said, please, sit. She took the chair he indicated, aware of every gaze following her movements. This is the woman? A heavy-set man with a graying beard leaned forward. The rejected maid of Varek? He said the word like it was diseased. You expect us to accept her as queen? I expect you to accept whoever I choose, Lord Brennick. Maelor replied calmly. That is, after all, why you sit on my council, and not on a throne of your own. Brennick's face reddened, but he fell silent. Another counselor, a sharp-featured woman with silver streaked through her dark hair, spoke next. The people will question this, Your Majesty. A queen from an enemy kingdom? One who was publicly discarded? It will be seen as weakness, or worse, as mockery. Then the people will learn otherwise. Maelor's voice carried an edge now. When they see her crowned, when they see her seated beside me, when they watch her grow into the queen Thornhaven deserves. He paused. Unless any of you wish to challenge my decision directly. Silence. I thought not. Maelor gestured to a servant who brought forward a document. The marriage contract. Review it. The counselors passed the pages around, muttering among themselves. Sorsha watched them, trying to read their faces, their scents. Most smelled of suspicion and resentment. A few carried notes of curiosity. None smelled welcoming. She was reading the contract terms herself when the chamber doors crashed open. A man stormed in. Young, handsome, with Maelor's dark coloring but none of his cold composure. His eyes blazed with fury as he stalked toward the table. "Brother," he snarled, "what madness is this? You bring an enemy's cast-off into our home, into our mother's seat?" Carveth. Maelor's tone didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, tightened. "You weren't invited to this meeting." "I don't need an invitation. I'm your heir until you produce one of your own." Carveth's lip curled as his gaze landed on Sorsha. "Which I assume is the point of this humiliating farce. You're so desperate for a broodmare you'll take another man's scraps?" Sorsha's face burned. She opened her mouth to defend herself. Maelor moved first. One moment he was standing at the head of the table. The next, he had Carveth pinned against the wall, one hand wrapped around his brother's throat. The council erupted in shouts. "You will address your future queen with respect," Maelor said, his voice soft and terrifying. "Or you will not address her at all. Do you understand?" Carveth's face purpled. He managed a jerky nod. Maelor released him, stepped back, smoothed his jacket as if nothing had happened. "The contract will be signed," he announced to the room. "The wedding will take place in 3 days. Until then, Lady Sorsha is to be treated with every courtesy owed to my betrothed." His dark eyes swept over the counselors. "Anyone who fails to do so will answer to me personally." No one spoke. Sorsha stared at the king who had just defended her honor with casual violence. He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge what he'd done or why. But when he returned to his seat, his hand brushed against her shoulder. Just a whisper of contact. And despite everything, Sorsha felt something unfamiliar stir beneath the cold ache in her chest. That night, alone in her chambers, Sorsha replayed the day in her mind. The contract had been signed, the wedding date set. She was going to be queen of a kingdom that didn't want her, married to a king who didn't love her, and haunted by questions no one would answer. Why had Maelor really chosen her? What was the darkness Nolwenn warned about? And why, when he'd defended her, had she seen black veins crawling beneath the skin of his hand? Sleep didn't come for hours. When it did, she dreamed of ice spreading across a beating heart and a voice whispering, "He chose you because you're the only one who can save him, or destroy him." The ceremony was nothing like she'd imagined. There were no moonflowers, no silver thistle, no thousands of candles casting the world in gold. The great hall of Thornhaven was lit by torches that burned with pale blue flame, casting everything in cold, ethereal light. The guests wore black and emerald rather than white and silver. And instead of joy humming through the crowd, Sorsha felt only tension. They were watching her like prey. She walked the aisle alone, as tradition demanded in Thornhaven. No father to give her away, no attendants following behind. Just Sorsha in her black wedding gown, moving toward the altar where Maelor waited. He looked carved from shadow tonight. Black, formal attire that seemed to absorb the torchlight rather than reflect it. His dark hair was pulled back from his face, revealing the sharp angles of his features. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. When she reached him, he extended his hand. His skin was ice. "You came," he murmured, too quiet for anyone else to hear. "Did you think I wouldn't?" His gaze shifted, revealing something unguarded. "I thought you might reconsider. Run while you still could." "Where would I go?" Sorsha placed her hand in his. "Back to Valdoria? Back to being a laughingstock? You could have gone anywhere. Started fresh somewhere. No one knew your name. And spend my life hiding from what happened?" She held his gaze. "No, I'd rather face it head on." For just a moment, his grip on her hand tightened. Not painfully, almost protectively. Then the high priest began to speak, and the moment passed. The vows were different here. In Valdoria, mates promised eternal devotion, undying love, souls bound across lifetimes. In Thornhaven, the vows were simpler, starker. "Do you take this woman as your queen and partner?" the priest asked Maelor. "I do." "Do you swear to protect her life with your own?" "I swear it." "Do you bind your house to hers? Your fate to hers? And your blood to hers?" Maelor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I bind them." The priest turned to Sorsha. "Do you take this man as your king and partner?" "I do." "Do you swear to stand beside him in darkness and in light?" Sorsha glanced at Maelor. Darkness and light. The words felt weighted with meaning she didn't understand. "I swear it." "Do you bind your house to his, your fate to his, your blood to his?" "I bind them." The priest nodded solemnly. "Then by the ancient laws of Thornhaven, I pronounce you bound, king and queen, partners in rule and in life." He paused. "You may seal the bond." In Valdoria, this would have been the marking, teeth in flesh, blood and claiming. Here, Maelor simply lifted her hand to his lips. The kiss was feather light, his mouth cold against her knuckles, but something sparked at the contact. A jolt of sensation that raced up her arm and lodged in her chest. Sorsha gasped softly. Maelor's eyes darkened. He'd felt it too. "What was that?" she breathed. "Later," he murmured. "We'll discuss it later." The crowd erupted in restrained applause. No cheering, no celebration. Just polite acknowledgement that their king had finally taken a queen. Sorsha wondered if anything in Thornhaven was ever warm. The wedding feast passed in a blur of faces and names she wouldn't remember. Lords and ladies offered congratulations that felt more like condolences. Servants refilled her wine glass without being asked. Carveth glowered from across the hall, his fury barely contained. Through it all, Maelor sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He barely ate, barely drank. But every time someone approached Sorsha with veiled hostility in their scent, he would shift slightly, angling his body between her and the threat, protecting her without a word. Out. "You don't have to do that," she said quietly during a lull in the endless introductions. "Do what?" "Shield me. I can handle their disapproval." Maelor's expression didn't change. "You shouldn't have to. Not tonight." A spark of unexpected tenderness flickered behind her ribs. She extinguished it quickly. This was an arrangement. He'd been clear about that. Whatever kindness he showed was political, not personal. But when his hand found hers beneath the table, she didn't pull away. The bridal chamber was in the eastern tower, far from Maelor's own rooms. Sorsha noted the distance with something between relief and disappointment. "Separate lives," he'd said. Apparently that started immediately. Nolwenn had prepared the room beautifully, fresh flowers on every surface, a fire roaring in the hearth, the bed draped in furs so soft they looked like clouds. Sorsha stood in the center of it all, still wearing her wedding gown, unsure what to do next. A knock came. She tensed. "Enter." Maelor stepped inside. He'd removed his formal jacket, leaving only a white shirt unlaced at the throat. His hair had come loose from its binding, falling around his face in dark waves. In the firelight, he looked almost approachable. Almost. "I wanted to ensure you had everything you need," he said, remaining near the door. "The room is perfect. Thank you." Silence stretched between them. Sorsha gathered her courage. "The contract mentioned producing heirs." Maelor went very still. "I know we agreed this would be purely political," she continued, her cheeks burning. "But I assume that aspect still requires participation." "It does." His voice was carefully neutral. "But not tonight." "No? You've just been rejected by your fated mate, publicly humiliated, torn from your homeland and married to a stranger." He took a single step closer. "Whatever the contract requires can wait until you've had time to recover." Sorsha stared at him, You're giving me time? I'm giving you a choice. His dark eyes held hers, something I suspect you haven't had much of lately. The words hit harder than she expected. Her eyes burned with sudden tears she refused to shed. Why are you being kind to me? She whispered. You said this was political, practical. You said you had no interest in affection. I don't. But something in his expression shifted. Softened, if stone could soften. That doesn't mean I want to cause you pain. He moved toward the door. Wait, Sorsha heard herself say. Maelor paused, his hand on the handle. Will you stay? Just for a while? The request came out smaller than she intended. I don't want to be alone tonight. After everything. For a long moment he didn't move, didn't speak. Then he crossed to the chair by the fireplace and sat. I'll stay until you fall asleep, he said quietly, but I won't share your bed. Not tonight. Sorsha nodded, her throat too tight for words. She changed behind the dressing screen, trading her wedding gown for a simple night shift. When she climbed into bed, the furs were as soft as they looked, embracing her in comfort. But it was Maelor's presence by the fire that finally let her close her eyes. She dreamed of ice again, but this time there was a flame burning at its center. When she woke, he was gone. But on the pillow beside her lay a single black rose, and despite everything, Sorsha smiled. The days blurred together at first. Sorsha learned the rhythms of Thornhaven slowly. The morning audiences where Maelor heard petitions from his subjects. The afternoon council meetings where lords argued about borders and taxes. The evening meals taken in the great hall, surrounded by courtiers who still regarded her with suspicion. She was queen in name, a stranger in truth. But Maelor made good on his promise to protect her. When Lord Brennick questioned her right to attend council meetings, Maelor cut him off with a single glacial look. When Carveth made a snide comment about her Valdorian accent, Maelor had him removed from the hall. You're making enemies for my sake, Sorsha told him after one particularly tense dinner. I had enemies long before you arrived. Maelor refilled her wine glass. A few more won't make a difference. Still, you don't have to fight my battles. You're my queen. His tone brooked no argument. Your battles are my battles now. The words shouldn't have affected her, but that night, alone in her chamber, Sorsha pressed her hand to her chest and felt her heart beating faster than it should. 3 weeks after the wedding, Maelor came to her rooms. It had become a pattern. Every few nights, he would appear at her door. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, reading or staring at the fire. He never touched her beyond the occasional brush of fingers, never crossed the invisible line between companionship and intimacy. But tonight felt different. You're troubled, Sorsha said, watching him pace before the hearth. The eastern border. He stopped, his shoulders rigid. Varric has been moving troops. My scouts report increased activity. At the mention of Varric's name, the ache in her chest pulsed. Weaker now than it had been, but still there, still present. He's testing you, she said, probing for weakness. He's testing us. Maelor turned to face her. The marriage was meant to stabilize Thornhaven. Instead, it may have provoked him. You think he'll attack? I think he's furious that I took something he discarded. A muscle ticked in his jaw. Varric always was possessive about his toys, even the ones he no longer wanted. Sorsha flinched at the word. Toys. Maelor noticed immediately. Forgive me, that was poorly phrased. No. She stood, moving closer to him. You're right. That's exactly how he saw me. A possession. Something to display until he grew bored, then throw away. She stopped an arm's length from him. But I'm not his anymore. I'm yours. The words hung between them. Maelor's eyes darkened. You're not a possession, Sorsha. Not to anyone, least of all to me. Then what am I to you? He didn't answer, but his hand rose slowly, hovering near her cheek without quite touching. May I? He asked, his voice rough. Sorsha's breath caught. Yes. His palm cupped her face. Cold, so cold, but gentle in a way that made her shiver. "You asked once why I chose you," he murmured. "At the auction of the unwanted, you called it." "The rejection ceremony," she corrected softly. "Same thing." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I chose you because when I watched Varric discard you, you didn't collapse. You didn't beg. You stood there with your heart breaking and you refused to shatter." Tears pricked her eyes. "I was shattering inside. But you didn't let them see." His gaze intensified. "That kind of strength is rare, precious. I wanted to protect it." And now? His hand trembled against her skin. "Such a small thing. Such a telling thing." "Now I want more than I should," he admitted. Then he kissed her. His lips were cold, but the kiss itself was fire. Soft and searching at first, then deeper as her hands fisted in his shirt. He pulled her closer, one arm banding around her waist, and Sorsha felt something crack open inside her chest. Not the rejection. Something else. Something new. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mailer rested his forehead against hers. "I shouldn't have done that," he said. "I wanted you to. That's the problem." He pulled back, his expression anguished. "There are things you don't know about me, Sorsha. Things that make this dangerous." "Then tell me." "I can't." He stepped away, putting distance between them. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "Mailer. I should go." He was already moving toward the door. "Forgive me. I shouldn't have come tonight." "Wait." She caught his wrist and froze. Beneath his sleeve, black veins crawled across his skin, spreading from his hand toward his elbow, pulsing with darkness that seemed alive. Mailer yanked his arm free, pulled his sleeve down. "Forget what you saw," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Then he was gone. Sorsha couldn't sleep. She paced her chambers for hours, replaying the image of those black veins, the fear in his eyes. Near midnight, her door opened again. Mailer stood in the entrance, his expression raw in a way she'd never seen. Broken open. Desperate. "I shouldn't have run," he said hoarsely. "I've been running my whole life. From this. From feeling anything." He crossed to her in 3 strides. "But I can't run from you." He kissed her with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose. That night, the winter solstice, they didn't hold back. No careful distance, no invisible barriers. Just 2 people clinging to each other in the darkness, terrified of what the morning might bring. By dawn, Sorsha had made a decision. She would uncover the truth about his curse, whatever it cost. 6 weeks into her marriage, Sorsha discovered 2 truths. The first came in the morning, when she woke with nausea churning in her stomach. At first, she thought it was nerves, or something she'd eaten, but when the healer examined her, the woman's eyes widened with unmistakable recognition. "Congratulations, Your Majesty," she said. "You're with child." The world tilted. Pregnant. She was pregnant. But how? She and Mailer had only been together a handful of times since that first kiss. Brief, stolen moments in the darkness. Passionate, but careful. He always pulled away before they went too far. Always kept some invisible barrier between them. Except once. 3 weeks ago, the night of the winter solstice. They'd both drunk too much spiced wine. The barriers had crumbled. And Maelor had taken her to bed with a desperation that left them both trembling. Afterward, he'd held her close, his cold body wrapped around her warm one. "I'm sorry," he'd whispered. "I shouldn't have let this happen." She hadn't understood then. She understood even less now. "You can't tell anyone," Sorsha told the healer. "Not yet. I need to inform the king first." The healer nodded, though curiosity burned in her eyes. Sorsha found Maelor in his study that evening, poring over maps with his generals. When she asked for a private word, he dismissed them immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked the moment they were alone. "You're pale." "I'm pregnant." The words fell like stones into still water. Maelor didn't move, didn't breathe. His face went blank in a way that made her stomach clench with sudden fear. "Say something," she whispered. "How far along?" "The healer estimates 3 weeks." His eyes closed. A shudder ran through him. "Maelor." She moved closer. "Talk to me, please. You're frightening me." When he opened his eyes, they were wet. Sorsha had never seen him cry, had never imagined he could. But here he was, the cold and fearsome Alpha King of Thornhaven, with tears tracking down his face. "It's too soon," he said, his voice cracking. "I thought we had more time." "More time for what?" "Maelor, what's happening to you?" He laughed, a broken, terrible sound. "I should have told you from the start, before I dragged you into this nightmare." "Told me what?" Maelor rolled up his sleeve. The black veins had spread. They covered his entire forearm now, creeping toward his shoulder. In the dim light of the study, they seemed to writhe beneath his skin. "This is my inheritance," he said. "The curse of my bloodline." Dread coiled in Sorsha's stomach. A curse? My great-grandfather sought power beyond what any alpha should possess. He made a deal with something ancient, something dark. In exchange for the strength to conquer his enemies, he accepted a shadow into his blood. Maelor's voice was hollow. "Every king since has carried it. It sleeps during childhood, awakens when we take the throne, and slowly, year by year, it consumes us." "Consumes you how?" "The cold, the darkness, the isolation." He looked at his veined arm with disgust. "It feeds on connection, on warmth, on love. The more I care for someone, the faster it spreads." Horror dawned in Sorsha's chest. "That's why you said you couldn't love me." "I can't love anyone." The tears kept falling. "Not without dying. Not without accelerating the curse until it takes me completely." "But I'm pregnant. If loving accelerates it, then every day I spend caring for you and our child is a day closer to my death." He met her eyes. "You see now why I kept my distance? Why I tried so hard not to feel anything?" Sorsha's hands covered her stomach instinctively. "What happens when the curse takes you completely?" "I become the darkness, a creature of shadow with no memory of who I was. My great-grandfather lasted until 40. My grandfather until 35. My father." His words fractured. "My father died at 30. The same age I am now." The room spun. Sorsha gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. "That's why there's been no queen for 11 years, she realized. "That's why you've been alone." "I couldn't risk caring for anyone. Couldn't risk the curse spreading faster." He laughed bitterly. "Then you appeared, proud and broken and beautiful. And I couldn't help myself. You tried to warn me, that first night. You said this was dangerous. I should have been stronger, should have kept my distance." His hand reached for her face, then stopped midair. "But I'm weak, Sorsha. I've been so cold for so long, and you're so warm." Sorsha caught his hand, pressed it to her cheek despite the ice of his skin. "Then let me warm you," she said fiercely, "for whatever time we have left. You don't understand. The more you love me, the more I love you, the faster. I don't care." Tears streamed down her face now, too. "I've already been rejected, already been humiliated, already lost everything I thought I wanted. But you gave me something I never expected." She pressed his palm harder against her face. "You gave me a home, a purpose, a child." "A death sentence," he corrected. "A life worth living." She pulled his hand down to her stomach, pressing it flat against where their child grew. "Feel that? That's our future. That's what we're fighting for." Maelor's composure finally cracked completely. He fell to his knees before her, his forehead pressed against her belly, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Sorsha held him, her fingers threading through his dark hair, her own tears falling onto his bowed head. "I can't lose you," he choked out. "Not now. Not when I've finally found—" He stopped. His body went rigid. "Maelor." Sorsha's heart lurched. "Maelor, what's wrong?" He didn't answer. His hands gripped her hips, his breath coming in sharp gasps. When he looked up, his eyes had changed. The obsidian irises were shot through with veins of pure black, and his skin was so cold it burned. "Run," he rasped. "Sorsha, please, run." The shadows in the room began to move. The shadows didn't just move. They breathed. They peeled away from the walls like living things, tendrils of pure darkness reaching toward Maelor with hungry intent. His body convulsed, his back arching as the black veins spread visibly across his neck, his jaw creeping toward his face. "Maelor!" Sorsha grabbed his shoulders. "Fight it. Stay with me." "Can't." His voice was barely human now, layered with something ancient and terrible. "It's too strong. The love. Feeling you. The child." It woke something. The shadows lunged. Sorsha threw herself over him instinctively, shielding his body with her own. She expected pain, expected to be torn apart by the darkness. Instead, light exploded from her skin. Heat surged through her veins, not painful, but overwhelming, like swallowing sunlight, like becoming the sun itself. Golden, blazing, impossible light that drove the shadows back with an inhuman shriek. The darkness recoiled, writhing against the walls, unable to approach, while that radiance poured from Sorsha's body. She stared at her hands in shock. They were glowing. Actually glowing, like she'd consumed a star. "What?" she gasped. "What is this?" Maelor looked up at her with eyes that were slowly clearing, the black veins retreating from his face. "You're a luminary," he breathed. "Gods above, you're a luminary." "A what?" Before he could answer, the door crashed open. Nolwenn stood in the entrance, her silver hair wild and her pale eyes wide with urgency. Behind her were guards, healers, counselors drawn by the commotion. "The shadows," Nolwenn said. "They manifested?" "They tried." Maelor was struggling to his feet, using the desk for support. But she stopped them. Every eye turned to Sorsha. The light had faded, but she could still feel it humming beneath her skin. Warm, powerful, utterly foreign. "How is this possible?" Lord Brennick pushed forward. "She's Valdorian, common-blooded. There's no magic in her line." "Clearly there is." Maelor's voice was regaining its strength. "Someone bring the court historian, now." The historian was an ancient woman named Thessaly, bent nearly double with age but sharp-eyed as a hawk. She examined Sorsha for long minutes, muttering to herself, consulting texts so old their pages crumbled at the edges. "Your mother," Thessaly finally said. "What was her name?" "Ivelisse." Sorsha frowned. "Why?" Thessaly's breath caught. "Ivelisse of House Dawnmere?" I don't know. My mother died when I was young. My father never spoke of her family. Because he didn't know." Thessaly's hands trembled as she pulled a tome from her pile. Or perhaps because he chose not to see. She opened to a page illuminated with gold leaf. House Dawnmere was destroyed 3 decades ago, wiped out by a plague that killed every member of the bloodline. She looked up at Sorsha. "Except, it seems, one daughter who escaped. Who married into Valdorian nobility and hid what she was." "What she was?" Sorsha's voice shook. "What was my mother?" "A luminary, a wielder of pure light, the natural enemy of shadow magic." Thessaly's eyes gleamed. "The only thing in existence that can destroy the curse eating your husband alive." The room went silent. Sorsha looked at Maelor, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Hope. Maybe. Or fear. Or both. "I can save him?" she whispered. "Potentially." Thessaly closed the book. "But it would require channeling more light than you've ever touched. More than your body may be able to withstand." She paused. "It could kill you both. Or it could free him entirely. There's no way to know until you try. Then I'll try." "Sorsha, no." Maelor was on his feet instantly. "I won't let you risk yourself. Risk our child. And I won't watch you die slowly while I do nothing." She gripped his hands, ignoring their cold. You chose me because I don't shatter. Remember? This is me refusing to shatter. This is different, is it? She stepped closer. You've been fighting this curse alone for years, pushing everyone away so you wouldn't hurt them. But I'm not everyone. Her hands moved to his face. I'm your wife, your queen, the mother of your child, and I'm telling you that we face this together or not at all. Tears gathered in his dark eyes. I can't lose you. Then don't. She kissed him softly. Trust me instead. They prepared the ritual for midnight. The great hall was cleared. Protective circles drawn in salt and silver. Counselors and servants evacuated to safe distances. Only Nolwenn remained, standing guard at the doors. Sorsha stood in the center of the circle, Maelor facing her. The black veins had spread further in the hours since his collapse. They covered his arms completely now, crawling up his neck like dark ivy. His skin was colder than ever. If this doesn't work, he said quietly, I want you to know, don't. She pressed her finger to his lips. Tell me after, when you're healed, when we're both alive to hear it. He caught her hand, kissed her palm. Stubborn woman. Stubborn king. Thessaly began the incantation. Ancient words filled the hall, resonating in Sorsha's bones. She felt the light stirring inside her, responding to the call. It rose like a tide, warm and golden, pushing against the boundaries of her skin. Focus on the bond, Thessaly instructed, the connection between you. Let the light follow that path into him. Sorsha closed her eyes, reached for the thread that connected her to Maelor. It was there, fragile but real. Not a manufactured bond like what she'd believed she had with Varek. Something different. Something they'd built themselves. Choice by choice. Moment by moment. She poured her light into it. Maelor gasped. His body arched backward as golden radiance flooded through their connection, racing along the bond toward the darkness inside him. The shadows fought back. They erupted from his chest in a wave of pure black, slamming against Sorsha's light with vicious force. She staggered but held firm, feeding more power into the connection. The light and dark crashed against each other like warring armies. And then, a voice cut through the chaos. Enough. The word shattered Sorsha's concentration. Her light flickered. The shadows surged. She spun toward the source of the voice. A woman stood at the edge of the circle, tall, elegant, with auburn hair streaked with gray and eyes that Sorsha would have recognized anywhere. Aunt Morvayn? She gasped. Morvayn stepped over the salt circle like it was nothing. The protective barrier should have stopped her, should have kept anything dark from crossing. It let her pass without resistance. You shouldn't have interfered, child, Morvayn said, her voice carrying that familiar sweetness underlaid with something Sorsha had never noticed before. Something cold. You were supposed to complete the curse, not break it. What are you talking about? Sorsha's light flickered uncertainly. What curse? What do you have to do with any of this? Everything. Morvayn smiled, and it was not the smile of an aunt. It was the smile of a predator. Who do you think arranged your fated bond with Varek in the first place? The words hit like physical blows. The Seers, Sorsha started, were paid. Handsomely. Morvayn circled the ritual space slowly, her elegant gown trailing behind her. There was never a true bond between you and Varek. I manufactured it, bribed the Seers to declare you fated mates when you were just an infant. Sorsha's hand flew to her chest, to the place where the rejection had ached for months. The pain I felt, she breathed, when Varek rejected me. It was real. I felt it. Oh, the pain was real, Morvayn said dismissively, but it wasn't from a broken mate bond. It was from your own belief, your own shame. You expected the bond to hurt, so it did. Her smile turned cruel. The mind is a powerful thing, especially when it's been manipulated since infancy. Horror crashed over Sorsha like a wave. Why? She demanded. Why would you do this? Because I needed you here. Morvayn's gaze shifted to Maelor, who was on his knees, the shadows still writhing beneath his skin. I needed you bound to the last Shadowborn king, your love accelerating his curse, your devotion feeding the darkness until it consumed him completely. She laughed softly. Love is such a useful tool. It makes people so delightfully stupid. Sorsha's mind raced. The rejection, Varek choosing Cosima instead of me, also arranged. Cosima was easy to manipulate. Promise a girl a crown and she'll do anything. Morvain stopped directly in front of Sorsha. I knew you wouldn't stay in Valdoria after being publicly humiliated. I knew you'd accept any escape offered. And I knew Maelor would offer. Her smile sharpened. He's been watching you for years, you know. The sad little princess with no mother and a father who despised her. He thought he was being clever, attending the ceremony to steal Varek's rejected mate. He didn't realize I'd been counting on exactly that. You manipulated everyone. The horror of it crashed over Sorsha. My whole life, everything that's happened to me, you orchestrated all of it. Not all? Morvain's expression flickered with something like frustration. Your mother was supposed to die before she could pass her power to you, but Ivelisse was stubborn. She hid her nature even from me, her own sister-in-law. I didn't realize you'd inherited the luminary gift until tonight. Her own sister-in-law. A chill swept through Sorsha's veins. You married my father's brother. I married into your family specifically to find Ivelisse, to end the Dawnmere bloodline once and for all. Morvain's eyes glittered with ancient malice. I've been hunting luminaries for centuries, child. One by one, I've extinguished every light that could threaten my master's plans. Your master? The shadow itself. Morvain's voice dropped to a reverent whisper. The entity that Maelor's great-grandfather invited into his bloodline. It promised power to his house, but its true goal was always to find a vessel strong enough to contain it fully, to be reborn into flesh. She looked at Maelor with something like hunger. 5 generations of Shadowborn kings, each one bringing it closer to manifestation. And Maelor is the final vessel. When the curse completes, the shadow will consume him entirely and walk the world in his body. Maelor made a strangled sound. The veins on his neck pulsed violently. You used me, Sorsha breathed. Used my love to accelerate his curse, to speed up this possession. Your love is doing exactly what I needed. Morvain reached out to touch Sorsha's face. Such a good girl. Such a perfect pawn. Sorsha slapped her hand away. I'm no one's pawn. The light inside her flared, brighter than before. Not anymore. Morvain's eyes narrowed. You think your little spark can stop what's been building for 5 generations? The shadow is ancient, eternal. Your light is nothing compared to... My light isn't alone. Sorsha grabbed Maelor's hand. The connection between them blazed to life, not just the bond they'd built, but something deeper. The life growing inside her. Their child. A fusion of shadow and light that should have been impossible. Power exploded outward. Morvain screamed, thrown backward by the radiance. The shadows inside Maelor shrieked in answer, fighting against the golden tide. But it was different now. The light wasn't just attacking the darkness. It was merging with it. Transforming it. Sorsha saw flashes of understanding in the brilliance. The curse wasn't just shadow. It was shadow corrupted, twisted by the entity that had attached itself to the Shadowborn line. But shadow itself wasn't evil. It was simply the other half of light, the balance that made existence whole. The entity had broken that balance. She could restore it. Maelor, she shouted over the roaring power. Don't fight the shadow, accept it. It's part of you, not the monster wearing its face. His eyes met hers through the chaos. Dark eyes that had always held such coldness, such carefully maintained distance. But now she saw what that coldness truly was. Not absence of feeling, fear of feeling. Terror that every emotion would bring him closer to destruction. I don't know how, he gasped. Yes, you do. She gripped his hand tighter. You've been fighting yourself your whole life. Stop fighting. Stop being afraid. Tears streamed down her face. Let me in. All the way. Trust that I can hold both parts of you. Something broke behind his eyes. The last wall. The final barrier he'd kept between himself and everyone who'd ever tried to love him. He stopped fighting. The shadow and light collided inside him, not destroying each other, but intertwining. The corruption that had twisted the darkness for 5 generations burned away, leaving only pure shadow behind. And that shadow embraced the light like a long-lost twin. They merged. The entity that had corrupted his bloodline for 5 generations shrieked as it was torn from its host. It manifested in the air above them, a writhing mass of pure malevolence, formless and furious. Morvain scrambled to her feet. "No, Master, take me instead. Let me be your vessel." The entity turned toward her. For one terrible moment Sorsha thought it would accept, would pour itself into Morvain and continue its centuries-long quest for flesh. Then Maelor raised his hand. Shadow and light danced across his palm in perfect harmony. No longer corrupted. No longer at war. Simply balanced. "You were never welcome here," he said, his voice resonating with power both dark and bright. "This ends now." He closed his fist. The entity shattered. Its death scream echoed through the hall, through the castle, through the very foundations of Thornhaven. Morvain collapsed, her borrowed centuries catching up with her at once. Her skin withered, her hair turned white. Within moments, only dust remained where she had stood. Silence fell. Sorsha's legs gave out. Maelor caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her against his chest. His arms wrapped around her, and for the first time since she'd known him, his skin was warm. "You're warm," she sobbed. "Maelor, you're warm." "I know." His voice splintered. "I can feel it. I can feel everything." He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes, his beautiful dark eyes, were clear. No black veins, no creeping shadow. Just him. "You saved me. We saved each other." He kissed her. Not the cold, careful kisses they'd shared before. This was fire and sunlight, and everything they'd both been too afraid to feel. His hands cupped her face, her fingers tangled in his hair, and neither of them cared that they were kneeling in the wreckage of a ritual circle while half the castle pounded on the sealed doors. When they finally broke apart, Maelor pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he said. "I should have told you before. I was afraid saying it would kill me. And now? Now I'm afraid not saying it would kill me faster." He laughed, the sound bright and unfamiliar and wonderful. "I love you, Sorsha. I love our child. I love the life we're going to build together. Even though I'm stubborn? Especially because you're stubborn." He kissed her again, softer this time. Stubborn enough to save a man who'd convinced himself he couldn't be saved. 6 months later, the gardens of Thornhaven had never been so beautiful. Spring had come early this year, filling the grounds with flowers that hadn't bloomed in decades. The servants whispered that the king's curse had kept the land cold. Now that it was broken, life was returning. Sorsha sat beneath a flowering tree, her daughter cradled in her arms. Thessaly had been astonished when the child was born, a girl with her father's dark hair and her mother's amber eyes. And something else. Something unprecedented. "She carries both," the old historian had breathed. "Shadow and light. Perfectly balanced. She's the first of her kind." They'd named her Isolde, after no one. A new name for a new beginning. "There you are." Sorsha looked up as Maelor approached, his formal jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked younger now. Lighter. The permanent furrow between his brows had smoothed, and he smiled freely in ways that still made her heart skip. "Council meeting finished?" she asked. "Early, for once. Lord Brennick actually agreed with something I proposed." He sat beside her, his arm coming around her shoulders. "I think he's been replaced by a changeling." Sorsha laughed. "Perhaps he's simply adjusting to the new Thornhaven." "Perhaps." Maelor leaned over to kiss Isolde's tiny forehead. And how is my fierce little shadow? Fed and changed and completely unimpressed by her father's political achievements. As she should be. Politics are boring. He settled back against the tree, pulling Sorsha closer. This is what matters. You. Her. Us. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunlight dance through the leaves. So much had changed in the past year. Varric had finally sued for peace after 3 border skirmishes went disastrously wrong for Valdoria. Cosima, it turned out, was far less suited to queenship than anyone had anticipated. Rumors said Varric regretted his choice more with every passing day. Even Carveth had softened, grudgingly accepting Sorsha after she'd saved his brother's life. He'd never apologize for his early cruelty, that wasn't his nature, but he'd stopped glaring at her across the dinner table. For Carveth, that was practically an embrace. Sorsha found she didn't care about Valdoria anymore. Whatever life she might have had there felt like a distant dream. This was her home now, this kingdom that had slowly warmed to her. This man who had taught her that chosen love was stronger than manufactured bonds. This daughter who represented the future they'd fought for. Do you ever regret it? Maelor asked quietly. Regret what? Coming with me. Leaving everything behind for a stranger who offered you nothing but cold practicality. Sorsha shifted to face him. You offered me more than that. You offered me a choice. The first real choice anyone had given me in my entire life. She touched his face, marveling as always at the warmth of his skin. And I chose well. Even though I was dying? Even though I pushed you away at every turn? Even then. She kissed him softly. You were worth fighting for, Maelor. You still are. His arms tightened around her. I don't deserve you. Probably not. She grinned. But you're stuck with me now. Ancient law. A claimed queen cannot be returned. He laughed, the sound echoing through the garden. Is that so? Absolutely. I read it in a very old book. The historian confirmed it. Well, if Thessaly confirmed it, it must be true. Isolde stirred between them, making a small sound of complaint at being jostled. They both stilled immediately, watching with bated breath as she settled back into sleep. She has your stubbornness, Maelor whispered, and your dramatic timing. A dangerous combination. The best kind. They sat together as the afternoon light warmed the gardens of Thornhaven. The kingdom that had been cold for so long, the king who had been frozen for even longer, and the rejected mate who had turned out to be exactly what they both needed. Sorsha thought of that terrible night at the marking ceremony, the moment Varric had walked past her, the shattering pain of rejection. If someone had told her then that it would lead here, to love, to family, to a happiness she'd never dared imagine, she wouldn't have believed them. But that was the thing about fate. Sometimes the path that seemed like destruction was actually leading somewhere better. Sometimes the rejection was a redirection. Sometimes the enemy's hand was the one that would save you. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the cold king who claimed you as a political convenience would turn out to be your true home all along. I love you, Sorsha murmured against Maelor's shoulder. I know. He pressed a kiss to her hair. I love you too. Always. Above them, the shadows of the leaves danced with the sunlight, intertwined and inseparable. Darkness and light in perfect balance, just as it should be.